This is Visigoth Raw, and with us for what is part 14 of We Are What We Hated, with Larry, who's always here. We have another guest. Well, you're the one that runs this thing, bro. I'll tell you when I'm supposed to be funny. Well, we have Kathleen with us, and you've heard Kathleen on before. She did a show with us not too long ago. She is behind the KD Pearl Ministries. The link for that website will be there, and whatever we might dig up that we can possibly use as resources, I try to link it as many as possible with the audio that you're listening to now. Oh, Kathleen, okay, you've been listening to that series, We Are What We Hated, and something struck a chord in you. Do you want to tell us what that was all about?
Yes, and I do. I thank Larry for all his research and his work and his insights there. You know, they're really challenging and make us think. But what really spurred me was the comment about Islamofascism and the Vatican, and it wasn't a long reference, and it sort of tied in, I think it was, to Wahhabism, and that was a whole other subject, and then you just sort of moved on. But that was the key, in my view, and from my frame of reference, my worldview, that is the key to what's happening in a lot of the geopolitical spiritual climate right now.
No doubt about it, and I'm going to dig up something else that just came to me. Charles Wilcox, an author out of Canada, who wrote the book Transformation of the Republic, just sent something to me. I think I might have sent it to Larry. I might have been remiss not sending it to you, about Joey Ratzinger and what he's up to. And it just seems, and I mean, you know, we have to, whenever we try to time things, is when we know something's going to happen. And, of course, we just went through something like that with the Days of Rage and all this stuff. It doesn't look good. However, there are times, it seems, that there is an acceleration of certain movements, and I guess I could quantify it and prove it if I had to, but I tell you, I also just feel it, that something's going on right now, especially with regard to world economics, but there's other things also at play. Having said that, yes, there is something shaking without a doubt. And also, Larry, do you want to comment to that? Or?
Yeah, I was going to say that Ratzinger was in Germany this week,
yep.
And his basically what I think the tour was all about was shoring up the right in Germany, and what we could maybe call the religious right, although it's somewhat different from our own country. But he's there to shore up the right wing in Germany, and to try to solidify support for the Roman Catholic Church and the Roman Catholic Church in league with Germany, which is at this point in time becoming the dominant power in Europe. And I think we're going to see at some point the Roman Catholic Church become the official religion of the European Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, once again.
How does that jive with you, Kathleen?
Well, yeah, that totally validates what's happening. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago I went into Europe, and I went to a lot of the churches, and you cannot evangelize in Europe now publicly or on the streets. They can arrest you because of the Roman Catholics, and they've put a kibosh on open witnessing. So, yes.
That's amazing. I was not aware of that. That's frightening right there.
Well,
go ahead, Kathleen. No problem.
It is because that is the issue, I think, behind all of this is if they can stop your voice, if they can stop you from speaking the truth, then they can pull the hoodwink over you, so to speak, the lie.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the basics principles of civil liberty is the idea of freedom of religion and the ability, to present your religious views and to witness to others as a born-again Christian. That's really scary because that smacks of the old days of the Inquisition in the Roman Catholic Church.
But there's been a move afoot anyway, and I guess it's been most publicly advanced by Rome for this ecumenism, which on face, you have to admit, it sounds good, except that when it comes to religion and what we've been edified by and what we know to be the truth in Scripture, and that is, we can't all be one big happy family. We don't apparently all worship the same God. And when you step back from that in today's society, you're dealing with people mostly they're just nominal, whatever they are. I mean, they're not really that Christian or that Muslim or that Jewish, but it just sounds bad. And what's also injected into that by other people is the idea that, oh, I see, you don't like our religion, and it kind of gets into like, therefore you hate it, and it's not the case. It's like, you folks do what you want to do. I can't come along with that. And that seems to be a real problem because we're into this like one big happy family across the world, and it just does not work when it comes to what the Lord told us to obey. Kathleen, you want to work on that?
Well, yeah, to be holy means to be separate, first of all. It doesn't mean we're not to have unity with everyone. And the Soviet experiment really illustrated that. I started going into the Soviet Union, into the Muslim countries, and Islam, the largest gathering of Muslims in the world, was under the former Soviet Union. And you had all kinds of sects and cultures, and there was never any cohesiveness between this Turkmenistan Islam over here and this Tajik Muslim over here. It wasn't the same faith. There was no cohesion. And so that's the whole principle, even behind communism or socialism, is we all have to be one and go for, the rulers or the leaders of that. It never happens. What happens is you don't care anymore what so-and-so does. You just want your vodka and your place to sleep, and you could care less about going to work. Your productivity, all your values, I mean, man is basically selfish, and that drive to have your own place, your own home, all those things are taken away by any sort of mass corporatism.
Well, one of the things that has struck me of late, and I'm kind of just hedging and hawing here because I want to pull something out that I think might be interesting for the most part. Maybe I'll do that a little bit later, and not to keep everybody in suspense, but I sent a little excerpt of a book written in about 1909, and I sent it to Bill Johnson and Chris Ardern and also to Gordon. And I make a lot of it because it's a futuristic book in a sense. It was written by a Catholic priest who had been an Anglican and whatever this means, I mean, converted. I think it's the same, but it doesn't matter. And his brother was a Jesuit. His name is Robert U. Benson. He wrote Lord of the World. And he writes about a war that can only be construed as a Third World War, but it's before World War I and II. And in that book also, and because it's written by, obviously, a Catholic priest, it talked about Catholicism being the largest religion at that time. Now, everyone would say, well, that's Islam right now. I don't know. I mean, do you have any numbers that would indicate that one is spreading more than the other?
The numbers I've heard were that they're running pretty much neck and neck. Supposedly there are roughly 1 billion Roman Catholics in the world and roughly 1 billion Muslims in the world. That's statistic I heard maybe a year or so ago. And then when you add in probably around 500 million, quote, Protestants or non-Catholic Christians, you got a 1.5 billion to 1 billion in ratio.
And what have you seen, Kathleen?
That sounds right to me. That sounds about right. It's yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, the other thing that's in this article, not the book that I'm talking about, I'd like to bring an excerpt out of that because to me, this makes a lot of sense as to the way things might shake, if you will, in the next decade or so. I mean, they're talking about Marxism taking hold in 89, but they're referring to 1989, nothing that happened in 1889. And I'm just wondering how in the world that Benson could be that accurate. And also at that time, by the way, there's a lot of strange things, interesting things that come up in and around the city of London that have to do with Mackinder's take on what the last empire would have to hold in order to have an empire. And, of course, Brzezinski took a hold of that and created the Grand Chessboard off Mackinder's extrapolation. And remember, that also took place in the first decade of the 20th century. And then you also have H.G. Wells and others that are talking about the open conspiracy, although he would write that later on, but a utopian society. So something was going on that these people, I think, were plugged in. I don't think they were guessing accurately, and that coincidentally, they're all pretty much where we are today. And like I said, I'd like to share that excerpt later on. But as it pertains to Germany also, this article, which I'm going to send to you within a second or so, Kathleen, it talks about, and Larry, this is why I sent it to you as well, is because it describes Germany as pretty much being, I guess you could say, a certain kind of center in more ways than one for the European Union that we kind of could know to be in time, the Holy Roman Empire.
Germany is the base. Germany is the power and will be the dominant country. It is. In fact, it is there. It is now the dominant power in Europe. And what you're going to have is a fiscal union. You will have a set of nation states will basically no longer be sovereign nation states. And you will have a European Union, which will be much more like the United States. You will have, different countries as language groups, but you will have an empire, what we would call a Holy Roman Empire, and we know what the holy, quote-unquote, is in that empire, and that's the Vatican. I think one thing we need to talk about is the Vatican's hidden agenda, which is to control Jerusalem, and that fits in with the whole conflict between the Roman Catholic Church and Islam, and I think we're going to have a new crusade, and I think that's building.
Okay.
Well, my comment on that, is that I agree. It's about Jerusalem. It's always been about Jerusalem, and I think that the Vatican Church has been working since World War II with the Muslims and with the fascists, the Nazis, and bringing them in and bringing an alliance. And out of that came the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And Jerusalem is the heady cup. If they can bring Jerusalem under their jurisdiction and their control, then it's a power base for the three major religions of the world, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, just traditional Christianity, Catholic Christianity.
Yeah, the Bible, in Bible prophecy, the Antichrist, the person which we call the Antichrist, he's not called that in Revelation, but in other passages in the New Testament. But that figure, that world figure, that emperor, is going to declare himself as God in Jerusalem in the rebuilt temple. We know that's going to happen as far as Bible prophecy goes. So at that point in time, we know that the Holy Roman Empire has repossessed Jerusalem, and that event will take place.
All right, Kathleen, do you want to lead us anywhere else?
Well, my thing, the thing about Jerusalem and the thing about the Catholic Church is the Catholic Church had Jerusalem during the Crusades. It lost it. It lost its powers of state in the early 1800s and then got it back with the Lateran Treaty in the early 1900s. And I think that the Vatican was crushed when the United Nations came in, and whenever I think they were they were consolidated and formed out of the League of Nations during the mid-1940s. And when Israel was made a state, Vatican took a big loss because that's the power base spiritually. That's where Jesus died and shed his blood, and that's always the hot controversy. So she wants that back. She wants it under her jurisdiction because she does have dominion over all the nations of the earth as a political state that's incorporated through religion. And the triple tiers of the papacy, she has triple crowns the Pope wears, says that he is the sovereign head over the earth. It's the ultimate Maximus Dominionist policy, and they're going to get it. They will have it, and it's I think that it's possible that they're using Islam and backdoor deals with Mahmoud Abbas to play Islam into their agenda.
Well, I definitely think that's true. If y'all would permit me, I'd like to read some passages from an article called Vatican's Hidden Jerusalem Agenda.
Mm-hmm.
It says, as far back as the 8th century A.D., emissaries were sent to Jerusalem by the Emperor Charlemagne to negotiate agreement with the Muslim Caliph Harun al-Rashid. The result was that Jerusalem became a protectorate of the Holy Roman Empire. Historical records indicate that such a protectorate was limited to the oversight of the welfare of Christians, the care and protection of designated holy sites, and the properties of the Roman Catholic Church in Jerusalem. The fact that the Caliph would be a financial beneficiary to this enterprise was a given. Muslims supported the Kaiser's army in World War I and again of the Nazi regime in World War II was the end result of a long historical nexus between the Muslims and Germany. From the time of Charlemagne Harun Pak through the attempt by Kaiser Wilhelm to seize Jerusalem in World War I to this day, elements within Germany have historically viewed themselves as protectors of the Roman Catholic Church. From the time of the failure of the Great Crusades, German elites have worked to find ways and means of seizing the plum job of protector of Jerusalem. The Vatican already has a significant presence in Jerusalem by virtue of free access to its holy sites over which Rome has legal jurisdiction under Israeli law, including both its institutions and assets in Jerusalem. The consolidation of these arrangements came by virtue of a bilateral agreement termed the Fundamental Agreement between the Holy See and the State of Israel, which the Israeli government signed with the Vatican on December 30th, 1993. The terms of this agreement, composed in secret, were subsequently legislated by the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. What remains largely unknown is the secret deal done by current Israeli President Shimon Peres and the leftist peacenik, former Meretz Party member Yossi Beilin, known widely as Perez's Poodle. Journalist Joel Bainerman, a well-known commentator on Israeli affairs, claims, quote, the end goal of the Vatican is to seize control of the old city of Jerusalem out of the clutches of the State of Israel. To that end, they have made a secret agreement with Israel which obliges Israel to respect the extraterritorial claim to their physical presence in the city. In short, we've accepted the Vatican's right to have little Vatican sovereign embassies throughout our eternal capital of Jerusalem. That same Vatican has committed itself in public and in a written agreement to ensure that the Palestinians have sovereignty in the old city of Jerusalem. And the author goes on to say, yet beyond the proof of the hidden agenda of the Vatican exposed by commentators, there's the more sure word of prophecy, which we have well documented in our publications, have forecast the coming of an individual who will be the spiritual head of a great religious political institution centered in Europe, spreading its tentacles toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. And it quotes Daniel 8 and 9.
Who wrote that, Larry?
That's an article called Vatican's Hidden Jerusalem Agenda. It's written by a man named Ron Fraser. It's in trumpet.com, which is a Christian publication. I don't agree with all of their theological views, but when it comes to prophecy, I think they're right on.
Well, that is the agenda. The agenda is the cup of reeling is Jerusalem. And the Vatican has bought up great parts of Israel. A lot of the Greek Orthodox churches and Armenian Orthodox and others, because they've diminished in congregants. They don't have the cash flow, and the Vatican has come in and brought their properties and incorporated them under their wing, and that is exactly right. And I believe that same agreement he was talking about with Shimon Peres was also it was in 1992. It was initiated, according to some of my research, and it was with Ratzinger, Cardinal Ratzinger, who's now Pope Benedict, and with Mahmoud Abbas. And they made the deal, and then they signed the papers in 1993. And the arrangement, to my understanding, is that the Vatican would have jurisdiction over the old city. They would make Jerusalem have two mayors, an Arab or Palestinian mayor and a Israeli mayor, and that the United Nations would have it under their political
oversight,
military control.
Okay.
And when you go to Israel, there's a place called the Hill of Evil Council, which is where the United Nations compound is. And you see UN trucks all over, and this Hill of Evil Council is the same hill that Caiaphas, the high priest at Jesus' time over the temple, had his residence. And interestingly enough, Tony Blair also has his faith-based ecumenical office in his organization on the Hill of Evil Council right there. So they're moving this. They're doing it a lot through the back door and through backdoor agreements. But I think that the legal treaties and the arrangements are already in place. And now with what's happening currently with the Palestinian Mahmoud Abbas trying to make the Palestinian state, he is forcing the issue that we want it, we've waited long enough, we want it now, and we'll get violent if we don't get what we want, which is the spirit behind Islam, is a spirit of violence. Allah is not the same God as the Judeo-Christian God. He is a God of war and a God of violence.
That is absolutely historically true, and I don't care how many times they come on television and commentators telling us that Islam is a religion of peace. History just does not bear that out. And, I mean, the symbols of Islam don't bear that out.
No. And if you study the Quran, which I have done and read many times, it is not a religion of peace.
No, it's not.
At all.
You know, but in fairness, let's face it, there's a lot of people who think Christianity isn't too peaceful either. So,
yeah.
I mean, truly.
And the problem is that they're not talking about, they don't see true Christianity. They're seeing things such as the Crusades, which was not a Christian effort. That was a Vatican effort, and
a geopolitical
and I don't
one.
consider that Christianity.
Yeah.
But one of the problems we're dealing with here, and we've talked about this before, not necessarily the three of us exclusively, but you know that whoever gets the bully pulpit, whoever gets time in the mainstream news, whether it's electronic or print, are usually the radicals, and therefore everyone looks at that particular individual and then believes that everybody's like that. I mean, we all sit there and cringe when we see people like Hagee and such get up there, and what are you going to say? I mean, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then everybody thinks, well, you're all like that, and that works pretty well. I mean, I have to admit, it's a very facile strategy, but I guess it always works. And I'm not denying that there isn't an element of violence in Islam, but I would have to say also there's a lot of people who could hang things on us, and even in this very country. One of the things that everybody wonders about is we were such a Christian nation, and that Jehovah went ahead and created this little country for us. How in the world do you explain away a genocide of the Aboriginal peoples? That doesn't go down too well. So I just mean that it seems to come with the territory that you will always have this kind of element. And the reason I bring that up is that no matter what happens in the world, if we are truly headed for a third world war, and Kathleen, I'll throw this to you first, and then Larry, pick it up if you would after. I would think that in the end, no matter what causative agents are introduced, it'll be seen as a religious failure, intolerance, if you will, that will be the trigger for a third world war. What do you think, Kathleen?
Oh, absolutely. It's already fomenting. It's already in the process. Mahmoud Abbas just stated that there will be no Jewish state. We will have a Palestinian state, and if you read any of the charters of the PLO, which come from his mentors, it is, we are going to wipe the Jews off the map. And he is definitely following the footsteps of his fathers, who were fascist, and they were tied into the Third Reich. And I'm looking for the gentleman right here now. Here it is, al-Husani, who started the Muslim Brotherhood, and he was a thug, and he just declared a jihad and a fatwa.
Certainly
in Armenia, and then went on and became friends with Adolf Hitler. He started the Bosnia Muslim genocide, which spur the recent war in the Balkans, and the Balkans is very strategic for Europe. It is the door to Turkey and to the Middle East. And this man was Arafat's uncle, and Arafat is, Mahmoud Abbas is walking in Arafat's shoes. They're Freemasons, and their agenda is they're anti-Semitic. They're anti-Semitic to the hilt, and this is really illustrated to me. Last year, I went up to Jericho, down to Jericho, up in the West Bank, and I was doing some ministry amongst the Palestinian Arabs. And it was very interesting, and it was a privilege. It really was, because the Arab Christians who took me there, they're very particular, because the Holy Land is, everybody wants to have a ministry in a piece of the rock, which is Jerusalem. Oh, I went and preached in Jerusalem, whatever. And so they don't allow a lot of people to come in to their work because tourists mess it up. So as we were going by, we passed by this. It was a hut. It was a square. It was a mud hut, and it had all these tiles on it. And I said it was green and black and white. And I said, well, what's that? And they said, oh, that's the Palestinian Liberation Organization. That's where the Hamas have their soldiers quartered. And I was like, you could see that there were fascist symbols on this building, and there was that sense. And I had never, ever felt that before. And I've been to Israel a lot since the end of the 1990s. I mean, so many times I can't count. And it struck me, and I had known that, yes, okay, in every Arab university in the Middle East, Mein Kampf is required reading. So what we have at the Hamas level is Islamofascism and anti-Semitism, and I sense that the Vatican is playing that so they can jockey into position to get jurisdiction over Jerusalem. They're players.
Right.
They're pulling the strings behind the scenes.
You are absolutely right, Kathleen. I was just going to back up some of your statements here. Let me read what Al-Riyad Saud, founder of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, said. I quote, "The power struggle between Israel and the Arabs is a long-term historical trial. Victory or defeat are, for us, questions of existence or annihilation, the outcome of an irreconcilable hatred." And here's a statement from one of the Hamas leaders in the Wall Street Journal in 92. "The war is open until Israel ceases to exist and until every Jew in the world is eliminated." There is no attempt there to compromise or to tolerate the Jews. They want them dead. They want them out of there. That's that. There is no solution other than that for them.
Now I'm going to offer something, and I'm not trying to be a devil's advocate. I hate using that thing. But here's the feeling I get, and I'm looking at something in front of me, which apparently came from. Are you folks familiar with Alberto Rivera?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
He was a Jesuit priest who got out of the order and became a born again Christian. If that's the person I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I take what he has stated as being the truth. Mm-hmm. It would indicate in this one thing I have right here that I've been holding on for quite some time, that the Romanist Church kind of allowed Islam to be created and also to flourish to a certain degree. And it says here in this one quote, let's see. Excuse me. Okay, here we go. While Muhammad was being prepared, he was told that his enemies were the Jews and that the only true Christians were Roman Catholic. He was taught that others calling themselves Christians were actually wicked imposters and should be destroyed. Many Muslims believe this. My feeling is that, yes, I mean, of course, Muslims do not want to hear this, but it has always been my understanding that that religion was allowed to grow, if you will, and that the Vatican was sitting right on top of that and basically said, not in a paraphrase of Rivera's words, but what I've come upon, and that is, you can do what you want, but you leave the Catholics alone. And if you think about it, that's kind of what has happened. But I do believe, as much as we hear about this violence, and here's my feeling straight out, that they will be used as a triggering mechanism, but they will not have a shot. I mean, exactly. I think they're going to get wiped out, and and
I think that's been the plan all along, Viz.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're useful idiots.
Now,
in the Vatican.
Right, exactly. Now, Kathleen, my feeling was, yes, the Vatican wants to be, the Vatican wants custodianship, right, of the entire, of the Jerusalem. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And they're well on their way, are they not?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Almost got it in the bag.
Now, Ben Gurion, as I had, I think, emailed to you, in that January, I believe, 18th, 1962, Look magazine, looking 25 years ahead. Are you familiar with that?
No, but you mentioned something about it. I remember that.
Ben Gurion supposedly projected, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, what it means, and we were talking about 1985. That's the 25 years ahead of 1987, excuse me. So anyway, Ben Gurion comes out with this thing about, it'll be like a court of the world, and there will be a center for the three religions. And I'm like, well, first of all, you're not guessing. I mean, again, like I said, they know the plan. But here's what I'm wondering, and not to the exclusion that I do not care about Israelis, but I would think by the Vatican's presence, if it can get that presence before it all breaks loose, would that not in a way protect Jerusalem? Or do you think that, why would the Vatican go down there, grab custodianship, and then allow destruction to come upon it? Especially when, and I'll add this to it, okay, not to make it too complicated, but we all believe here, I don't have to mince words, that Satan's invested in Rome, and Satan wants to sit on the throne in Jerusalem. Why would destruction be brought down on the nation of Israel? Wouldn't it be somewhat excluded? And I don't know if I got this right or not, but it would seem, why would they go down there?
I don't think, according to the Bible, Israel will be wiped out, and Jerusalem's not going to get wiped out. But there is going to be a battle, but the people that are going to get wiped out aren't going to be the Jews exclusively. There will be Jews killed, but I think the majority of the casualties will be the Arabs and those who are confederated with them.
Kathleen, what's your view on that? Do you believe that they'll come to destruction, or that through whatever means, either, through Jehovah or through what Satan wants to pull off before Christ returns, that any destruction will come, or massive destruction will come to Israel? What's your thoughts on that?
It's my thoughts on that are that war always protects those who are in power. And so those that are in power who are pulling the strings behind the military, will forge a war so that they can consolidate their power. And then they will, but it never always, it doesn't always work out that way, but that's the agenda. Is we have to have this war so that we can come to the table and say, we need to all have one world religion.
Right.
We need to all come to the same table, and we need to forget our differences because this religious war has happened, and it's brought destruction, and this is not God. Now, those who are not in agreement with the tenets of our religious structure that we're going to set in place, those are the people that are going to be persecuted. And those are going to be the marginalized one. And generally, those will be those, the Scripture says, that are of the covenant. Those who really worship God in spirit and truth, that are truly belong to the covenant people, because it's a covenant war. I don't know if you know this. You probably do. But the word warlock means covenant breaker or treaty breaker. And that's who Satan was in the beginning, and that's still his agenda. So he wants souls of men for his hell that he's destined for, and he's going to have anyone that will break covenant and come into agreement with him and break covenant with the Lord God Almighty. And the only way that is shown, and this is my issue with Bibi Netanyahu. He's working in the arm of flesh. He's going into the United Nations. He's saying, well, Israel has a right to exist and so on and so forth. Well, Israel's using the arm of flesh. Israel is a decadent, corrupt society and culture, and it's not godly. It's not a godly place. It's not a holy land. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So they've broken covenant with God. There's going to be a severe discipline on them. But in the process, I think that the real covenant breaker is moving in. The warlock, the powers of the occult that move at the higher levels. And, of course, the big one is Satan.
Larry, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, we talked about this in one of our episodes here about what I believe will happen. I believe that the Third World War will come in two stages. The first part of the Third World War would be when the nations, the Arab nations, along with Russia, would surround Israel, and I think that's one part of it. And I think that that the European power, the Holy Roman Empire, will just sit back and watch this, and they're going to come in and make a treaty. It says that in the Bible. I wish I'd prepared better. I wish I could illustrate with biblical passages, but I don't have those memorized. And I believe that there will be a second part of the Third World War. And I'm not sure exactly how we fit in. I mean, by that I mean the United States, but I think we're going to get crushed in the Third World War. And I think that will eliminate, and I think the Russians are going to suffer as well as us. And I think that will allow the Holy Roman Empire to be a worldwide institution. And I think that after that happens, after that treaty is made, then you'll see a worldwide Holy Roman Empire, so to speak. That will be the beast system, and of course that will be the time when people will have to worship the emperor as a god, just as they did in the days of Rome, upon pain of death, and that you will have to have the mark of the beast, some sort of mark. I don't know what it'll be. It could be a tattoo. It could be anything. I'm not sure. It could be a chip in your hand or your forehead. There have been a lot of things written about that. A lot of it is quite lurid and kind of silly, but I know that at some point in time you're going to have that mark to buy and sell. You're going to have a total totalitarian nightmare police state brought into the world at that point. And then there will be the final battle of Armageddon, and that will be when the Lord Jesus Christ returns, destroys all of those who are the evil followers of Satan, and then we'll have the new heaven and the new earth. Praise the name of Jesus Christ.
Well, let me throw this out, because I'll say I do spend a certain degree of time thinking about it. I don't get worried about it. I just find it interesting, and because something that I alluded to earlier on is happening right now, and my belief is that the very first palpable machinations that all will feel around the world, but especially in the United States, is going to be some kind of economic cataclysm.
Mm-hmm.
And just now, as far as it suits my purposes as believing that this is now being said, we've been going back and forth for quite a few months about, we're out of the recession or we're going to go into a new recession. And I sit there and go, give me a break. I mean, whatever we're in, we're still in, and nothing left. And, you want to call it, I mean, it's not depression.
They won't use the D word, but let's face it, we're in the early stages of a depression, of a worldwide depression. And people don't want to admit it.
Well, what's happened just recently, though, it seems that I would actually say it was this clear that in the last 2 weeks, now there's certain intimations that pop out from the fiscal talking heads, who, of course, get their marching orders, and they're starting to say, well, the job sector's not picking up, and, the thing is, one, we cannot pay the debt back.
No.
Two, we're not getting the jobs back. What we're seeing is a shift in the way things are done. And we have been stripped of just about everything, so you cannot get these jobs back. they create 2,000 jobs, and they hail that as like the greatest thing since sliced bread. And it's like, is this how low we've sunk? And the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. So be that as it may, now every so often you hear Greece is in trouble again, Italy's in trouble, Ireland's in trouble, everybody's in trouble. And then it goes away for 3 weeks, and they come back with another scare, not scare tactic, because actually that's what's happening. So my point is I do believe that we're going to see a situation, at least economically, that is going to tie us into somewhat of a world system, because there's a number of planks that have to be fulfilled for all the different, shall we say, sectors of life around the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that's happening right now. Now, having said all that, here's what I'd like to throw out to you guys, and that is, when I think about how much Satan will accomplish before he's finally thwarted, obviously we must go through the tribulation underneath it. But I don't know how much of all that's planned will ever get implemented. I don't know. What I would say to you, Kathleen, as far as it deals with eschatology, how much does Satan conquer? How much can he impose upon the world before finally Christ returns?
Well, he has economic control. We know that he's the merchandiser, and he causes the pyramid merchandising system, even in religious institutions, political. But I think Daniel says it clearly when Daniel is such a beautiful picture of what's going on now, because he was in the middle of the complete Babylonian system as an administrator and still kept his integrity in his faith. And that's a character type for us. But he saw this huge vision of an idol that had a head of gold, a chest of silver, and all of that. And the last kingdom, it says, was divided, 10 toes, and it was with clay and iron that did not adhere. And my take is that's the lowest. I believe the previous empires from the past were much more powerful and world-controlling than even the final empire will be. It will be mixed. It will not adhere together, and there will be tremendous conflict. And saying that, it said that there was a rock, and this. I was thinking about this before we were praying about this. You know, this rock that's cut out of the mountain without hands means it's supernatural. It's not man-made. It's not a man-construct. And it crushes this idol and becomes a huge mountain that fills the earth. Now, this is a parable of the Rock of Ages. It's a parable of the kingdom of heaven. And these empires come and go, and those who truly follow the Lord, who are truly part of the body of Christ, we can continue on. And this is the issue with the whole thing of rocks, because the Dome of the Rock, it's over a rock, and it's in the Middle East when you go there. It's a rock pile. Jerusalem's a rock pile. There's rocks everywhere, rocks upon rocks upon. I mean, it's just you go, I get it. You know, there's a lot of rocks there. And this Kaaba stone in Mecca is a rock from outer space. And these people, they bow down and worship rocks. Islam, Allah is a rock. You know, they worship rocks and things that they've made with their hands. And so it says in this verse, and I've been thinking about this, about the beast system, is that no one can make war against the beast. There's not one man. You can't come up against this thing, but you can't come up against God or Jerusalem or His will either. That Jerusalem is also the rock that's immovable. So there's this huge conflict that's escalating to the end of the ages. And apocalypse just means the unveiling of Jesus. Basically, all of this is designed to bring judgment on the wicked. And every man, God fashions every man's heart, and He knows what they are. They're all individual, and He calls the council of the nations to naught. And this is the revealing, the unveiling that Jesus is going to be Lord, and He's cleaning this up, this mess that we're in, this wicked mess, through His judgment.
Larry.
Yeah, I completely agree with her, and I've always seen that rock in that story in prophecy as being Jesus Christ. the Rock of Ages. And I always saw it as destroying the world empires, and it was just a metaphorical way to explain events that were coming. And if you look at the story in Daniel of that statue, it describes, and Daniel was right on the money. It describes, the Babylonian Empire, which was taken over by the Medo-Persian Empire, which was taken over by the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great, and then finally the fourth and final empire was the Roman Empire. And the reason I say that it was the final one is that the Roman Empire never really died. It kept being revived, and it has been revived through the Holy Roman Empire several times. It was revived through the Second Reich. It was revived through the Third Reich, and it's being revived again through the Fourth Reich. And if there seems to people that there is a connection between the Nazis and radical Islam, that's because there is a direct, total connection there. And we're seeing events now. The Muslim Brotherhood is pumping up a rhetoric and ratcheting up the pressure on the Jews as we speak. 2 weeks ago, a huge crowd of people in Egypt, in Cairo, went in and destroyed the Israeli embassy and tried to kill the Israeli ambassadors who had fled. The only people left were the embassy guards, and they were saved by Egyptian commandos. And the only reason that happened is apparently there was a phone call from Washington telling them that they needed to rescue those people. But the military just stood back and let them do it because they agreed with the idea. And just last week in Jordan, the Israeli embassy was invaded, and the Israelis have left there too. And I believe there are, or maybe that was Amman, but there are several, places in the Middle East that they're ratcheting up the pressure as much as they can, and the idea is to wipe the Jews out. And the Muslim Brotherhood is part and parcel of the New World Order. They are a direct descendant of Nazism and the Third Reich.
You know what I find interesting, if I got this right, this is going to be simplistic. It seemed that Britain and France, to a certain degree, before World War I, through such agreements as Sykes-Picot, McMahon Pledge, and the Balfour Declaration, were instigating for, obviously, Jews to go back into Palestine. I'm not so sure that they gave them a full manual on how to do that, but it just seemed that they were doing it. And on the other hand, it appeared to me that before World War I, Germany was kind of like currying favor with Islam, and especially as it regards what was left of the final Ottoman Empire. Yep. So it seemed to me that there was a square-off going on, or a preparation for a battle. Because, I mean, for many, many years, I could never understand the connection to the Axis powers with Germany and, the Muslims. It's like, can somebody explain this to me? It just seems so completely culturally, ethnically, racially, and religiously apart, and yet there was a conduit there, and I'm just wondering if that amalgamation was done in order to counter what the Brits and the French were going to do as part of the Allies in World War I. Am I making any sense with that?
Yeah, we've talked about this quite a bit. Earlier Kathleen mentioned Hajj Amin al-Husseini, who, in my opinion, is one of the most evil men who ever lived. And the Brits played a lot of games with the people in Palestine, both the Arabs and the Jews, and in particular in relationship to Amin al-Husseini. I'll give you a rundown of this guy, kind of a profile of who he was. And I've done that in previous work, but we'll do it again. I think it's important. He was born in 1893 in Palestine, quote Palestine, actually, in Jerusalem under Ottoman rule. He swore allegiance to the Ottoman Empire in 1914, and during the Armenian genocide, he was an officer stationed in Smyrna, and he participated firsthand in the killing of Armenian Christians in the Armenian genocide. 1.5 million Christians were slaughtered during this period of time, in an Islamic jihad by the Ottoman army. Then he returned back to Palestine in 1917 after the Ottoman Empire was starting to break up, and he brought with him the lesson of genocide, and he had a vision of a pan-Islamic empire where Jews and Christians were not going to be accepted. And in 1920 and 21, he started a series of riots in Jerusalem. He became a leading figure in organizing these riots, and he begins a lifelong campaign of inciting hatred between the Jews and the Muslims under the British mandate there. And he began a rule of terror over the local Muslim leaders who denounced him as an ignorant thug. And then in 1921, the British decided to play a little game and made him the local Grand Mufti, the local Muslim high cleric. He came in fourth place in a vote, but they made him the Grand Mufti anyway. The Muslim community rejected his candidacy because he had no credible Islamic education. He was not a sheikh, a religious accredited leader, nor an alim, an Islamic scholar, and yet he became the preeminent Arab power in Palestine, and that was a slap in the face to the Arabs there, and obviously a move to manipulate the situation. Then he was appointed in 1922. He was appointed the head of a Supreme Muslim Council, and he was very disappointed by Ataturk and his return to Turkish sovereignty, and he became fascinated by the idea that there was a lost Islamic empire, and that he vowed to fight all Muslim seculars. And then he implemented the restoration of the Dome of the Rock in the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, and he had the dome gold-plated for the first time. Thereafter, Jerusalem took on more importance as a holy site in the eyes of the Arab world. That was intentional. Muslim Brotherhood was established in Egypt in 1928, and he became a central figure and an ideological inspiration for these people. It was the mother organization for today's Egyptian Islamic Jihad and Hamas, and it preaches Wahhabi Islam, which justifies violence and a means to rid the Muslim world of its non-Islamic element. I've talked about his support for Hitler and what he did during the Second World War, and I have a quote here from a book called Islam Under the Swastika, which kind of summarizes it. Hajj Amin al-Husseini arrived in Europe in 1941 following the unsuccessful pro-Nazi coup which he organized in Iraq. He met German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop and was officially received by Adolf Hitler on November 28, 1941 in Berlin. Nazi Germany established for Der Gross Mufti von Jerusalem a bureau from which he organized the following: radio propaganda on behalf of Nazi Germany, 2, espionage and fifth column activities in Muslim regions of Europe and the Middle East, and 3, the formation of Muslim Waffen-SS and Wehrmacht units in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Western Macedonia, North Africa, and Nazi-occupied areas of the Soviet Union, and 4, the formation of schools and training centers for Muslim imams and mullahs who would accompany the Muslim SS and Wehrmacht units. As soon as he arrived in Europe, the Mufti established close contact with Bosnian Muslim and Albanian Muslim leaders. He would spend the remainder of the war organizing and rallying Muslims in support of Nazi Germany.
Well, I think it's important that we go over that we're reminded who the Hamas is, that this is Arafat's uncle, and he was the successor to the Hamas. And now Mahmoud Abbas is under, he's the ruler or the head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or the Hamas now. It's kind of mutated. When you're over there, it gets blurry because they've got, the Fatah and this and that. But in Israel itself, they will tell you that even the Arabs, most of the moderate Arabs, and especially the
Muslim nationalists and the Golden Square, a group of pro-Nazi, are
be under that brutal jackboot. And the Muslim Brotherhood is the full-blown child of Hussein, al-Husseini.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're moving into place. And Hillary Clinton is trying to establish diplomatic relations with the terrorists. Historically, the origin of terrorists, they're on the terrorist list. And this is the world has turned upside down if you live in the United States, because if you're patriotic, you become a terrorist almost. So it's this whole, and this is the work of the powers that are pulling the strings. It's confusion and to send in division, and then to change, to change the truth into a lie.
Exactly. All of this is coming straight out of hell. It's coming out of Satan's, power. It's coming from him and his minions. As far as Yasser Arafat, that same book, I have a passage here. Yasser Arafat was introduced to the Mufti, and the Mufti would subsequently become the role model and mentor for Arafat. In biographies of Arafat, whose real name is Mohammed el-Husseini, the Mufti is stated to be a distant relative of Arafat, though this claim has been denied as well. I think he actually was. For 2 years, beginning at the age of 16, Arafat worked for the Mufti and his covert terrorist network and organization, helping to smuggle and buy weapons in the war against Jewish settlers of Palestine. Sheikh Hassan Abu Saud, the Mufti al-Shafaria, worked with the Mufti. The Grand Mufti was a precursor for both the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Palestinian national struggle and movement to maintain a Palestinian state. The terror, fanaticism, and ruthlessness of that movement reflect the enduring legacy and influence of the Grand Mufti. In 1939, the Mufti established his headquarters in Baghdad, Iraq, where he set up a political department that maintained ties to Germany and Italy. Germany sought to create a Berlin-Baghdad axis and instigated a pro-Nazi coup. Iraqi General Rashid Ali Ghaliani, a militant Muslim nationalist, and the Golden Square, a group of pro-Nazi Iraqi officers, took over the Iraqi government. The Mufti sent representatives to Berlin and a letter to Adolf Hitler. In a reply by German State Secretary Freiherr von Weizsäcker, the Mufti was told that the Fuhrer received your letter dated January 20th. He took great interest in what you wrote him about the national struggle for the Arabs. Germany is ready to cooperate with you and to give you all possible military and financial help. Germany is prepared to deliver to you immediate military material. The Abwehr German intelligence established contacts with the Mufti at this time. Nazi Germany sent arms and aircraft to the Mufti's forces in Iraq, but the British were able to reoccupy Iraq, forcing the Mufti and el-Ghaliani to flee to Tehran. The Mufti then flew to either Afghanistan or Turkey, where he's known to have many friends. From there, he arrived in Albania, and on October 24th, he reached southern Italy. On October 27, 1941, the Mufti arrived in Rome. The Mufti would subsequently play a major role in organizing Muslim support for Nazism in Europe. Just a little background there to kind of further shore up what you were saying.
Let me introduce something also, and this goes back to, and Kathleen, I did send you that article from the Trumpet. I don't know if you have access to your email as we speak, but if you do, it'll be there. But in this, it says, only the most blind, and I'm reading from the Trumpet article entitled Pope's Visit Brilliantly Timed. It says, only the most blind of souls would deny that what Herbert Armstrong prophesied at the war's end in 1945, that Germany would arise to lead a modern form of the Holy Roman Empire in our time, is now staring us in the face. Let me throw this at you, Larry.
Yeah.
When we talk about empires, the Holy Roman Empire, as far as, this is my take, that in the absence of the real power and the real tangible Holy Roman Empire, that the British Empire kind of moved into that void. Because as far as I'm concerned, I don't know that there was any other empire as far-flung and as powerful as Rome, except for Britain. And Britain seemed to spread a lot of that empire through mercantile purposes with their British East Indies Company, right?
I don't know. I really wouldn't categorize the British Empire that way, but there's probably some overlap. But when you think about the Holy Roman Empire, it was revived several times, and I would say the Germans are much more. I mean, they are part and parcel of the Holy Roman Empire from the time of Charlemagne on.
All right, but
and when you think about it, the Holy Roman Empire lasted until 1806, I believe it was, when Napoleon took it over, and I don't know. I can see some overlap there.
All right.
I'm not saying the British Empire wasn't related, because I guess in a way it was.
Well,
but I don't see a direct correlation, no.
Okay, all right. But let me say this. They didn't say the sun never sets on Napoleon's empire. All right? Yes. And this plays into where I'm going.
Yeah.
France raised its head for a while, and, of course, it was dashed. Now, we get into the two world wars with Germany, but in the meantime, think about all that Britain colonized. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's huge. All right. I'm not going to try to make you go there, but I'm looking at that being pretty much a very potent empire. Now, in time, and before the Napoleonic scourge, which really took place only on the European continent. Mm-hmm. All right, now we get into World War I and II. Britain is still the top dog, and they get their nose bloodied in I guess you could say, a Pyrrhic victory in the Boer War, and realize, you know what, let's get the dumb Americans to fight this stuff. But here's where I'm going. Satan will use whatever he needs, and when he doesn't need it anymore, he has no problem with abandoning and betraying those who followed him. I find it and I've always said this to you, I find it interesting that Napoleon would go ahead and try to go against Russia in the wintertime. I mean, and then, of course, what happens? Hitler does the same thing. I mean, come on, guys.
Exactly the same thing.
This is suicide. Let's face it, okay? And my point is that the rulers are the ones that are tied into Satan, not the armies. So, World War I, I'm wondering if that weren't something where Germany was becoming a financial power. I think that Bismarck, a Protestant, moved into the political scene, and that was also the end of the Roman Catholic Habsburgs in Germany, the Kaisers. And I'm wondering if that war wasn't one of these where it was like, you know what, Germany's getting a little too big for its britches, we don't need this Protestant crap, and we'll smack them down. But the second time around, I believe that Germany's leadership was fully in with the Vatican and had to act as their avenging sword.
Oh, absolutely. Mussolini and Hitler both were part and parcel of an attempt to revive the Holy Roman Empire. I've got something here I'd like to read you. It's from Alex Constantine. It kind of goes along. It'll take a little while before it becomes clear what I'm saying here, but it says Theosophy developed from Rosicrucian secret doctrine, which taught that the leading bloodline, the Holy Grail bloodline, was descended from the historical Christ. Indeed, the Gnostics believed the entire Germanic people belonged to these prehistoric bloodlines, which originated from the ancient Aryan tribes that inherited parts of early Europe. It was believed that tribes directly descended from the ancient gods and the prehistoric super-civilization Atlantis. Adolf Hitler gained enormous popularity when he took racist and occult ideas to the ordinary German people that had previously been exclusive to the European aristocracy and the Rosicrucian secret societies of the Holy Roman Empire, such as the Knights of Malta and the Dragon Court. Hitler claimed that as Aryans, the German people were ready to be initiated into the deep occult and alchemical mysteries, and so evolved the consciousness to become the master race. Hitler and Heinrich Himmler, the head of SS and the Gestapo, even chose a sacred Rosicrucian symbol, the swastika, as their emblem. However, the Nazis would remain in service to the hidden masters of the Grail bloodline as their feudalistic occult doctrines dictated. In 1934, shortly after achieving power, Hitler declared, "We form an order, the Brotherhood of the Templars, around the Grail of the pure blood." Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy movement predicted the coming of a new Messiah to usher in a new age. And having met Hitler in 1919, Eckhart was convinced that Hitler was the one. Hitler was soon given the leadership of the German Workers' Party. And Eckhart wrote to a friend in fall of 1923 that, "Follow Hitler, he will dance, but it is I who call the tune. We've given him the method of communication with them. I shall have influenced history more than any other German." Through the reunification of the Holy Roman Empire, Hitler's Third Reich would bring on the restoration of the feudal system ruled by the rightful Grail and Dragon aristocracies, with the Aryan people as their new initiates. All other races would either be exterminated or would be their slaves. It was believed that ultimate world domination would allow for the culmination of the historical pursuit of the aristocratic and occult secret societies. A new world order and a new king would evolve from the purification of the world, and a literal second coming would be achieved as the king became a god. Well, that sounds like the Antichrist, and that sounds like exactly what the Holy Roman Empire was all about, and the dragon bloodline, the dragon court, and the secret church. These are concepts, Rosicrucian concepts, and I believe that the whole idea is that the aristocracy of Europe, which was behind the Holy Roman Empire and all its reemergences, all its revivals, are planning to put into place their God King, which I believe will be the Antichrist. Under this perverted, strange idea of them being, the Holy Grail bloodline, that they are descendants of Christ and Mary Magdalene.
Kathleen, I'm going to attack Larry in a second. But before, no, of course, he knows. But before I do, I want to go back to this topic. That's really what I meant. But you've sat here and you've listened to a bit. And how about your take on what we've been talking about?
Well, I agree, and I've watched that. I think there's another piece in the occult realm that's often overlooked. An occult is secret. That's what it means, hidden, and that's how it operates. That's why we're bringing this to the light. And that is the whole dragon issue, which is really coming to the forefront. Of course, I don't know if you've read the Antichrist in a Cup of Tea and all the heraldic symbols of the royals out of England, but they do come out of the Welsh, has the red dragon as its motif. Mm-hmm. And if you also go into the Vatican, into St. Peter's, you will see huge sarcophaguses of Queen what's-her-name with all these dragons all over it. But aside from that, is that in World War II, right when the Germans were ousted, they found 1,000 Buddhist monks had come into Berlin. And these came from Tibet. And it's interesting because I believe it was the SS were sent up to Tibet to find power, occult power, and they went to these different. And I have a friend who's real familiar with all of this. This is not my expertise, so this is second to me.
I would love to hear from that person. I would really love to hear from them.
Okay, he was a Buddhist. He actually was a Buddhist monk who converted and now has a ministry dealing with all the issues behind this. But anyway,
praise God.
yeah. Oh yeah. He's awesome in the spirit. But anyway, so the SS went there and they said, we want power from your gods. And they were informed, where are all the monks? And they said, they went to and all our gods have gone to Europe for the Great War. So these Buddhist monks all went in there. Now, the Dalai Lama is called the Yellow Pope, and he has been actually met, and you've probably seen some of the YouTube videos where several years ago the Pope had an ecumenical visit, and the Dalai Lama was there, and some Indian chief smoking the peace pipe and all that noise. And we're going to, kumbaya, live out not. This particular Dalai Lama has been doing occult rituals all over the United States and all over the world. He travels at a very high pace, and he has now become, let's see, what did he say? He
has a direct lineage, not lineage, but a direct connection to the Third Reich, because some of his tutors were, one of his tutors was a German SS officer who was there in Tibet.
Yeah, well, and he said he has just become a Marxist. So now the Chinese are like, giving him some tokenism. By the way, his community in exile is right on the 33rd degree parallel.
Wow.
Yeah. He's an interesting.
A little obvious there.
Yeah.
Well, where else would you want it to be?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, they just did in Washington D.C. their last Kali Chakra mandala, which is to this demon goddesses that opens up all these gods. She births. It's a demonic. It's like a wormhole in the spirit, or it opens up the pit to release demons
Right.
to the earth. And this particular demon goddess, one of her giftings is to change the times and seasons. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Tantric yoga is heavily into demonism and wow. I mean, I've read quite a bit about the Buddhists that really shocked me. I'd always thought of Buddhism as more of a like a philosophy and kind of a gentle, philosophical concept. But then I started looking into the type of Buddhism, that they practice in Tibet, and it's quite evil, and there's a great deal of contact with demonic spirits. They talk about it quite a bit.
Sex magic. Some of it's
sex magic and tantric yoga. Exactly.
Yeah, that's why Madame Blavatsky got a lot of her theosophy from them.
Exactly.
Kathleen, let me ask you something. I'm just going to take a wild guess. Have you ever read any books by Bob Rosio?
No. Oh, no. Hitler and the Occult, I think.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, real quick. I was saved in 81, but I didn't apply it to geopolitics, and I think a lot of Christians aren't doing that today. They think that somehow that's separate from everything, won't go any further there. And it took, and my wife and I had sat under him when we lived out in Pittsburgh. We went to his church, Cheswick Christian. They also have a school, Cheswick Christian Academy. So anyway, Rosio was the pastor there, and he was also the history teacher in the school. But after we moved back, years after, he sent me some of these books, and in reading in 1994, I read Hitler and what was it? What did you just mention? He sent me a bunch of titles, but what did you just say, that one?
Oh, Hitler and the Occult.
The Occult. And in that book, I think, because when you said that, it just hit me that that's the first time I encountered an account of that situation taking place in Hitler's bunker when the Russians and the U.S. came in there, and they saw all these dead monks all over the place. So
that's right. That's right. So anyway, the point. Let me finish where I was going. No. We're good. So the deal is now that the Dalai Lama's been on high speed with his Gucci. He has Gucci shoes in his Rolex watch. Yes. And he's trying to finish all this up. They call it a web of deception. And this is how they overtook Tibet, by doing these rituals with these urns and all the waterways and so on and so on. But my point is they do a dragon. They're getting into these dragon boat races. And now last spring, for the first time on the Hill of Evil Council, never happened before, the Buddhists came in and they had a fire sacrifice ritual. And I had pictures of it. And I'm telling you, these guys are under trance. They're under demonic possession, and they offer up fire and all these votive offerings on the Hill of the Evil Council. And they now they're going to, the Buddhists are bringing in these dragon boat races, which they've had up in New York and Queens, and up in and they're working with some of the Jews in Canada to bring it to the Galilee. The point is it goes back into Buddhism and a lot of ritual. But the Dragon Boat Festival, when it's happened, it invites the dragon god to come in. Mm-hmm. And you have to have the leaders of the community, the political leaders, and the businessmen come and welcome this dragon into your community. Well, why is this an issue? Because this is the dragon from China. And this is the financial thing, to bring it back to this financial thing. It's here comes China, and she's trying to bail out Rome and Italy and some of her bonds and others. I forget exactly what it is. She went into some banking institution. Well, that's pretty big. when you have the Chinese coming in saying, well, maybe we'll buy some of Europe out. So it's that political economic tide that's moving in from the Far East.
Wow, that's very interesting. I was not aware of what he's been up to. I think someone said, I think it was Christopher Hitchens, who normally I don't listen to because he's an anti-Christian atheist, but he made the statement that the problem with the Dalai Lama is that people accept him, on face value, that he's just a wonderful guy and all peace and love. And he said, it's just a function of propaganda that he really benefits from that. And he said, but he's he intimated that he was not all that he seemed on the surface, that he was actually someone who was quite devious.
Well, it is about politics, sex, and
Sure.
religion, isn't it?
Sure.
They're all the same.
And I didn't even get into that. My friend, who's in Israel, his name is Israel. He's an Israeli. He said, he informed me, don't you understand that Islam is a phallic worshiping religion, just like the Masons. That is what those prayer towers are, he told me. And when they go and a terrorist goes to bomb himself, he covers up his genitals so they'll remain intact when he gets into paradise. Now, come on.
But I mean, Kathleen, think about this. There probably isn't any nation, including our own, that isn't phallic worshiping, but passed off as other things like, say, the Washington Monument.
Right.
I
agree. It's about man's flesh ruling.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's what Satan told Christ. And, I bang this a lot, but, Luke 4:5, you want to know the history of the world? Satan tells Jesus, these are all my kingdoms. That's it. I run these things. And you can see it. And I have to laugh because somebody wrote me an email, and we talked about it. We went back and forth a lot of things, and this is no big aha to you folks, but you will normally find at least, and I can't say this for every single capital in the United States, state capital, but usually you'll find the male obelisk and you'll find the female dome. And one of the things I was reading about in 1863, and this had to do with Garfield, James Garfield's biography, what did they set on top of the newly furnished Capitol dome but the goddess of liberty?
Yeah. And the Vatican. The Vatican's no different.
Well, yeah. I mean, what do you have in the Vatican? About how many obelisks, by the way?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, this goes on everywhere, and that just tells you who runs the show in a secular means.
Yeah, paganism and the vestiges of the old pagan religion, the old mystery religions are all around us, in America especially, because there was so much Masonic influence especially with Washington, D.C. There's been quite a bit written about that. I mean, and it's right up in your face. You just have the eyes to see. And I think that's what it's all about is, it all started on the plains of Shinar with, the disobedience to God and the attempt to basically to worship Satan, convincing so many of the people there to worship him and the whole that whole situation there in Babylon.
And for a shameless plug, I'm going to tell you, we're coming out with a new edition of the Inside the Grassy Knoll E-Zine. And finally, I'm writing an article about the title of which is going to be A Godly Country with a question mark, and taking a look at all the occult symbology that we've embraced. But let me hit a couple of things if I can real quick, and I'll let everybody have their closing statements if we didn't hit something. What I wanted to throw to you, Larry, was this. The reason I mentioned Germany once and twice, I'm wondering, because the power is still, the mojo is in Rome. Now, I'm wondering if Germany isn't going to be raised up again as a vassal extension, a proxy of Rome to do what it has to do. I don't know that they're necessarily going to be, and we talked about this before, not boots on the ground, but now, as we've seen, financially, they're probably the most viable nation out there.
Without a doubt.
But
Without a doubt.
But I don't see them being loosed. I see them as being used once again by Rome.
Oh, exactly. That's what really they were doing in the second in the First and Second World Wars, was carrying out what Rome wanted done. I mean, when you think about, well, Mussolini and Hitler, both of them were put into power by the Vatican, essentially, through surreptitious means. And what was the first foreign policy move that Mussolini made was the Lateran Treaty, which restored the Vatican to nation-state status. He received the blessing of the Vatican for all his efforts. The Vatican went out and told the people quit voting for these middle-of-the-road leftist and socialist, and vote for Mussolini, and support the fascist party, and they did. And in Mussolini, I believe the figure was something like $90 million, which was a huge amount of money in those days. Something equivalent to $90 million was given to the Vatican, and the Vatican promptly invested that into Germany. This is in the 1920s, into German industry. And then when you get to Hitler, the first thing he did was make a concordat. One of the very first things he did when he went into office, he was put into office by the Catholic centrist party to a great extent. I've gone through all of this, I guess, in previous episodes. Again, I'm not real prepared to.
But I mean, Larry, are you familiar with Richard Bennett?
Name, but not.
I think he's an Irish former priest who went through all, but he had done an audio that was pretty good because he chronicles all the concordats that the Vatican signed with everybody, including Germany and Italy. So it was going to be peace in the valley for them, no matter what.
Right.
And of course, we're all very familiar with the work that Phelps has done, and also Thomas Richards. I mean, when you see the photos,
this has been documented over and over by so many people, and it's just so obvious that the Vatican, all down through the ages, ever since the time of I guess Justinian or so, that the Vatican has been basically running Europe in one way or another, and has been basically
try the world
attempting to run the world, and being successful to some extent in doing so, and I mean it's really kind of hard to doubt that.
Kathleen, would you indulge me? I just want to run one more topic by, and I'm going to throw it to you. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
You got a couple of minutes? All right. I'm not going to be long on this. I'm going to make this brief because I don't have to really explain stuff with you guys because you have enough background. That's not going to be a problem. I will also put the link up so people can read it for themselves. But here's what I want to just run by you, and I'm asking you if you feel that this could be a plausible scenario that we're coming toward right now, or at least in the near future. With regard to China, I would say this. My former partner, Harry, and I used to, kind of like make jokes about the NWO. He was on the show. He was always a blithe spirit. But we heard that when, China came into the World Bank, we said, okay, they're in tow, too. They're screwed as well. So, I mean, with the economies the way they are, even China's slowing down, so they tell us. But still in all, they're a power, and they don't have, a multi-million standing army for nothing. But anyway, here's from Robert Hughes Benson, Lord of the World, back in about 1909, somewhere in 1904 to 1909. These are British officials talking about this. And the one says, if the Eastern Empire chooses to move, we can do nothing. I don't know what they have. I don't know why they have not moved. I suppose it's because of religious differences. And the priest asked, Europe will not split? And the other gentleman answered, no. We know our danger now, and America would certainly help. But all the same, God help us, or you, I should rather say, if the empire moves, because she knows the strength she has. There was silence for a moment or two. A faint vibration trembled through the deep, sunk room as some huge machine went past and the broad boulevard overhead. And it says, Percy suddenly said, prophecy, sir, I mean about religion. And Mr. Templeton inhaled another long breath from his instrument. Then he again took up his discourse. And here's where we're going. I'm just going to read this paragraph. So understand something, that they're afraid that the Asian Empire, they're calling it the Eastern Empire, but before this it talks about it being basically Russia, China, and everything in the southeast. That is what is called the Eastern Empire. Now remember that, China and Russia. And here's where he says, briefly, there are three forces: Catholicism, humanitarianism, and the Eastern religions. About the third I cannot prophesy, though I think the Sufis will be victorious. Anything may happen. Esotericism is making enormous strides, and that means pantheism. And the blending of the Chinese and Japanese dynasties throws out all other calculations. But in Europe and America, there is no doubt that the struggle lies between the other two. We can neglect everything else. And I think, if you wish me to say what I think, that humanly speaking, Catholicism will decrease rapidly now. It is perfectly true that Protestantism is dead. Men do not recognize at last that a supernatural religion involves an absolute authority, and that private judgment in matters of faith is nothing else than the beginning of disintegration. Last sentence. And it is also true that since the Catholic Church is the only institution that even claims supernatural authority, with all its merciless logic, she has again the allegiance of practically all Christians who have any supernatural belief left. That's a lot there, and I don't know if you followed it, but we're talking about two things here, and that is a third world war and what religion might be able to stand after it's all over. And clearly they're saying, although Catholicism has taken a kneecap, they'll probably come back as being the thing. And also that America will stand in the breach against any kind of invasion of Europe. And I believe that might happen. I think it's a very plausible future scenario. And Kathleen, I'm going to throw that to you and your opinions and also anything that you want to hit before we go.
Okay, well, let me say that, yeah, that's a plausible scenario. I agree with that. And you triggered a couple of things.
Okay.
Just, he who has the gold rules the world. And so it's not just military and, on the battlefield. It's the economic battlefield that's being waged now. And China wants the United States. They're coming in through financial manipulation. Having said that, the Chinese, according to this pastor in Queens, they are buying up whole blocks of tenement housings and apartment housings. They're off the boat. They don't even speak English, and they're moving in. The largest Chinese population outside of China, Queens and Brooklyn. Thank you. So that's very interesting. Will the Chinese take out their own population? I don't know. But I heard an interview with a gentleman, I think his name is Charlie Wang, and he's an American Chinese, and he goes through a lot of the journalistic internet sites out of communist China, and there's been some high-level moles in not only the military but the political and business people who are very disgruntled with the regime right there that's operating and their practices right now. And the fact that they've been letting this information slip out into the United States means that there's some internal collapsing happening with the Chinese government that's being kept from the outside media. And there have been also noted that there's quite a few riots there. So they're not as solid as they appear to be. And I had just read, when I first went over to the former Soviet Union, right before Glasnost and Perestroika, I actually went into Kazakhstan. And it had been closed from the gospel for about 400 years. And I went to Almaty, Kazakhstan, and I had read these preparation books. I went with Frontiers. It was a frontline ministry to Muslim cultures out of the U.S. Center for World Missions in Pasadena. And I pulled them out when I started preparing because I wanted to look at Wahhabism. And they said, that's where I got the statement, that the Islamic culture was huge and under the Soviet rule. It was the largest gathering of Muslims under one governmental rule were the Stan states. But the problem is there was no real cohesion. And so you can have all these people under your rule. You can have all these Chinese that are Chinese Muslims in the Uyghur province, and down here they're this, and down here they're that, and there's Buddhists here, and there's a huge house church movement. And what you have is you don't have, the bigger you become, the more unwieldy you are as far as rule. having said that, I was looking at some of the history of authentic, and this is about the Daniel feet thing, where there's not any real adherence between the clay and the iron, and it's divided. There's a lot of division, and I always think, you got to keep jumping through the cracks, to stay tracking with the Lord. Mm-hmm. But with the church movement, when it moved away from the Western Church hence became the Roman Catholic Church out of Jerusalem. The church that went east became the Nestorian Church, and there was a division over the churches over whether Mary was the mother of God. Okay, it was a theological hair splitting. But the Nestorians were not hierarchical at all. They were non-organizational. They were businessmen. They were people who loved God. They were very much primitive Christianity. And they went through all the Central Asia, the Middle East, and all those countries, Afghanistan and India, and spread the gospel. And they were really vital. But what killed them was when the institutional, structured church came in, and the spirit was quenched.
I believe that.
And that's when Islam came in. Thank you. And it was behind the Western Church.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I believe that. I wholeheartedly believe that I can see that happening. That's very interesting.
All right, Larry.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, no, you did. I mean, no, I have no problem with it. And if I disagreed, I wouldn't tell you anyway. But no, I have no problem with it whatsoever. And I'm just letting you finish out here. Larry, any end comments? Or?
Yeah, I've got a quote here from Himmler, which is he gave in a speech in Posen in 1943 to the SS. And this kind of goes along, it's directly related to what we're talking about with Asia. He said, this will enable us to create the preconditions for the entire Germanic people and of Europe, led, ordered, and trained by us, the Germanic people over generations, to resist the fateful struggle within Asia, certain to break forth once again. We don't know when that will be, when the mass man arises on the other side with 1 to 1.5 billion people, then the German people with its, I hope, 250 to 300 million people, together with the other European peoples, for a total of 600 to 700 million people, on a perimeter extending to the Urals, or in 100 years extending over the Urals, will carry on its battle for life against Asia. Woe, if the Germanic people should fail to resist in this struggle. That would be the end of beauty and culture of the creative power of this earth. That is the future. That is what we're fighting for. So the Nazis were, aware of the idea of the population explosion in Asia and a struggle between what they believed to be European, Aryan man and the Asians. Just food for thought there.
That's why I brought in at the beginning of our show that Mackinder talking about that whatever was going to be the last empire would have to rule Eurasia, which is basically Portugal to Vladivostok, and if they were to do that, they had to take the heartland, which, Kathleen's very interesting, is that heartland, as Mackinder saw it, and as Brzezinski did a redo on it, is actually some of the provinces that I think, and of course this is absolutely choreographed, when Russia, shall we say, streamlined to become just not the USSR anymore, but Russia, it basically got rid of the troublesome, would you say, Turkic/Islamic republics. Would that be correct saying that?
When the Soviet Union came down, is that what you're saying?
When the Soviet Union ceased to be the USSR.
Well, I think what I saw happen is they came back to reaffirm their cultural identity. If you're a Muslim in the former Stans under Russia, you were a Muslim by culture. You weren't a Muslim by faith. They don't read the Quran. I've read the Quran they don't read the Quran. And it was a disintegrated place, and they were atheists, and they were communists. How does that work? So they were all these different things to survive. There was no real cohesive principles and belief system. since the Soviet Union has been disintegrated, what you have seen is there's a renaissance back to their original cultures and their identities. They're like children looking for an identity. They're like teenagers. Who am I? What am I? You know, what am I supposed to become? And that's what they become. And Wahhabism actually came out of Turkmenistan, which is still pretty closed. It's a closed country, much like, and Iran has strong ties with the Muslims. I mean, I know many Iranians and have worked with Iranians in Iran, in the church, in the persecuted church there, and in Central Asia, and they have strong ties with the Turkic Muslims, different linguistic group, one's Farsi and one's Turkish, and that means they have strong ties with Russia.
Okay. Kathleen, do you have any contact with Egyptian Coptic Christians? Do you know much about that?
I know a little bit. I have a few people that I've interfaced with, but I'm not real deeply involved in that end. My end has been the back, my calling is I've been going to former Soviet Muslim cultures through Central Asia and through the Middle East, and a lot of like the Armenians and Chechens, Kurds, Iranians, that whole backfire, and then into Israel and a lot of Arabs. Not so much on the Egyptian side. I don't know a whole lot.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I've been reading quite a bit about the persecution of the Coptic Christians, and they were fearful of the Muslim Brotherhood becoming more powerful in Egypt, and as it stands, they have become so. And there's a great deal of persecution toward them. One of their churches was burned down, and several people were killed in Cairo about 3-4 months ago. And they're greatly fearful. There's like 7 or 8 million of them in a population of about 56 million people in Egypt.
I did have an understanding of that. I also, there has been a revival in the Coptic Christian Church it started about 20 years ago. So they do have a real vibrant faith in a lot of churches there. But the Eastern churches are very much different than the churches we know here. Right. They're a lot more stable and traditional and doctrinal and relational, generally.
Are you talking about the Eastern Orthodox?
Not necessarily. Well, yeah, for lack of a better word, I don't want to talk about the Eastern Orthodox in Istanbul, more like the Armenian or the Assyrian Apostolic churches, or which say they came directly from Thomas when he left Jerusalem. They consider themselves the father of the Apostle Thomas. They're the churches that he established. So, and also in Iran. So it's more the Nestorian Christians, not so much the Byzantine sort of Eastern Orthodox.
That's what I'm thinking about. Aren't they but isn't it the last one you mentioned, the Byzantine Church? Isn't that the one that had maybe a centuries-long feud with the Vatican?
Yeah, it was. I believe it started over the Nestorian issue as whether what the name of Jesus really was, and it's one different Greek letter, and it's about his divinity that the split originally came.
Just a quick aside: when Pope John Paul II was laid to rest, there was, I guess, some talk that before that or during that there was some kind of mending of the fences between the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Vatican. Did you get that at all? That they put down some of their, asides.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's the whole ecumenism.
Right, exactly.
We have this surface of saying we agree, but when we're in the Church in the Holy Sepulchre, we're physically abusive to each other. Because the Armenian Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the church in the Old City. The Roman Catholic, it's allegedly where Jesus was buried. It's not, but it is, And so they have 4 of the major denominations: the Eastern Orthodox, the Roman Catholic, I think it's the Armenian and the Greek Orthodox, and they can't get along. As they don't. They're they don't even have the keys to the church.
Yeah, there's a great deal of hatred between the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholics, especially in Europe and former Yugoslavia, when the Serbians and the the Muslims and Croats were all going at each other in Croatia, they had a terrible persecution of the Orthodox Christians by Roman Catholic Croats. I think there's been a great deal written on that, and it's kind of a hidden small Holocaust, if you would. They rounded up all the Jews and Orthodox Christians and had at them in the concentration camps there.
Well, and honestly, that the Jews take the brunt of it, and just like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion came out, it was those Jewish bankers. And when I started in 2008, when the first economic collapse started happening, I'm afraid for the Jews because the rich bankers, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, George Soros, who is a Jew, who is all part of that, they give the average practicing Jew, the person who's just a decent human being, I was thinking, oh my gosh, now the world's going to accuse the Jews of being, the problem for the economic, downturns that are happening. It's a fearful thing.
Well, yeah, that's what the protocols were all designed to do, and there's a great deal of evidence that they were written by the
Jesuits. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, here we see. It's nothing new.
Yeah, that's a spurious book, a complete fabrication that has a long history, and it's very popular in the Middle East and it's being published probably as we speak.
Yes, and in all the Arab countries, and they're saying
they love it. I mean, it was introduced into Germany by Rosenberg, and he introduced Hitler to the book. It also there's a tie to the protocols to Madame Blavatsky's protege, a woman named I believe Yablinka. I can't remember. She was a Russian along with Madame Blavatsky, and she popularized it in Paris and passed it around to the intellectuals, the elite there in Paris, which a lot of people don't realize, but there's a great deal of anti-Semitism in France. France is one of the most anti-Semitic countries in Europe, along with Austria and Germany.
Well, and I just saw that old Academy Award-winning movie, The Life of Emile Zola. About the whole Dreyfus affair, which spurred Theodore Herzl to starting the Zionist movement. Right. And you just look at all of that, and you look at what's happening, and then you say, oh my gosh, somebody has to stand up and say, you have to separate and disseminate this out and look accurately. God fashions every individual heart and knows what it's in. It's an individual choices you have to take. You cannot just stereotype or ballpark people, and that He holds the Council of the Nations, and He holds the United Nations, and He stopped what was going to happen this week. He's still God, and that's we have to come back into that. Just because you're a Muslim does not mean that you hate me as an individual. If you can't see, the love of God operating through my life, and I'm not going to force anything on you. I'm just going to provoke you to jealousy, whether you're a rabbi or you're an imam or whoever you are, because I have a real and vital relationship with the God of the universe, and He is in control. And if you see that coming through my life, if that's my light and my testimony, then I have served the God of the universe faithfully. And that's the bottom line for all of us is that we walk in truth and we walk in the Spirit.
Unfortunately, most won't. But that's what we face.
Well, I just would like to go against the grain. Please join me.
No, but this is what we're faced with too, and that is, in a secular vein, it's what we've talked about here time and time again. And I'm sorry, but it's happening inside the church. One is the fact that, like Ibsen said, the majority is never right. No, secondly, as Jeffers said, the cold passion of the truth hunts in no pack. You got to shirk a lot of stuff and not want to be part of the mass or the herd. If you want to be free. And I think that yourself, Larry, myself, and others have been able to do that. I mean, we see what's going on. For those who are not Christian, who don't believe in Jesus Christ, I mean, all right. I mean, it's the way we say it, Kathleen, is the only way out is up. And that is the truth. And like you wrote to me the other day, and I passed it along, I just needed to see that again, and that is, who are we to war? How can we war with the beast? We can't do that. I mean, everybody's thinking about, these flights of fancy and like Sergeant York things and all this other stuff. No, it's not about flesh and blood, fist fights and shooting and stuff. It's all a spiritual matter. We win in the end. This earth is just, what? A blink in the eye of our existence, which is for eternity. And so, but it's a hard sell even for those who call themselves Christians, and we all have to be vigilant for our own salvation, because it's easy to pop off, but it's tough to, to really walk it when you're up against the wall. So, but I mean, that's where we're at, and I think very few people are there. It's just the way it is.
Well, can I read something from that movie
Yep.
that Emile Zola wrote, because he was a journalist and he was trying to just speak the truth, and he became very wealthy in his books, and a challenge for him to take the Dreyfus case meant that he would be heavily persecuted, and he would lose his comfort zone, and he may lose his affluence and his prosperity, and he did. He was found guilty and had to flee to England, where he wrote from there. But some of his last words, he said, to save Dreyfus, we had to challenge these who have the might of the world. It is not the swaggering militarist. They're but puppets that dance as the strings are pulled. It is those others, those who restlessly plunge us into the bloody abyss of war to protect their power. And I thought, how well said.
Oh, yeah, no problem there. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Hey, Kathleen, could you explain a little more about your ministry? Are you affiliated with a church, or are you non-denominational?
Well,
I assume you're non-denominational. I don't see you being a...
I'm a real free spirit, Larry. I have been in many churches. I actually was raised Roman Catholic and graduated from
kidding.
St. Francis High School. All girls. So I get it.
That's great.
And I came to the Lord, and I was mentored by some Christian Missionary Alliance teachers and preachers, and they deprogrammed me from Catholic doctrine and set me on a real strong biblical foundation. Then I became Spirit-filled later. And I danced around with Assemblies of God and Vineyard and a bunch of different churches, and I went with different mission organizations and different pastors and leaders out on the field. And then I just felt that I was to cut loose. I was a 501c3 for a while, and the Lord started convicting me that He didn't want me in that organization. And once I got out of all the paperwork from that, I began seeing all the legal implications.
Right.
And I really came down to, that who was my head? Was the state my head, or was Jesus Christ my head? And so I started going to Israel while doing other ministry trips to find, that the root of primitive Christianity, the first century church.
Right.
And I did a lot in that, but I'm independent now. But I work with a lot of pastors and leaders in different capacities and aspects. On the field here, I speak to them. We do a lot of I do probably three things. I do ministry trips. I do research, and I do a lot of research when I study a lot when I go to Israel. But I also do a lot of intercession, conference calling, national and international, with pastors and leaders. That's why I know about the Buddhist.
Right.
I have prayer assignments, and I go and walk and pray, and I do preaching and teaching, and I don't know, I'm a free spirit. I'm free.
I'm really glad that you tuned in to the show and heard me spouting off, and I'm glad that we were able to do this. It's really been a blessing to me. It's I think we're hitting on all cylinders with this type of programming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the privilege too.
It's great. It's been my privilege. I really enjoyed it.
You, Keith.
Are we quite done? Are we quite done yet?
Okay, I'm out of here. I ought to go take a
Oh, what a love fest this turned into. I tell you what, this won't matter to anybody who's listening to this because this will probably be out Monday. But as we're talking about it now, in another hour, I'm going to do 2 hours live on Untamed Dimensions, and we're going to talk about those who prophesied economics and where we were headed way back when, and also about the very lawless and soulless entity called the big corporation. And that's also part of this whole situation, too. As we all know, mercantilism is of Satan, and that's the Babylonian system. I think we can all agree.
Exactly.
But these are interesting times, and that's what I said at the outset to you, Kathleen, and also to you, Larry. I think we're seeing something take shape. Not everybody's getting the idea just yet. I mean, I think a lot of people, including ourselves to a certain extent, are in a dark room with an elephant, and we kind of feel, it's an elephant, but we're really not sure how big it is or where it's going, because we're not really being given, obviously, some kind of excuse the word, illuminating information. But I think right now, really, one of the first palpable send-downs from what's taking place with whatever we call the New World Order is economic. And we know it's a world system. I think this is probably the first step that's going to get us prepared for such a thing. And I think also that it's going to have some very savaging and ravaging effects on people in the United States when that which they call their wealth is no longer there. I'm not laughing about it. I don't think it's a good thing. And all of us, even myself, I got gold and silver, great. It's still a human system. And the point is, we're all going to find out just how far it runs with us as far as our belief, in Jesus Christ. And, it's a time when what could be shaken will be shaken. There's a lot of deception, and there'll be a lot of heartbreak about who we thought were the real deal and, in fact, weren't. So we all have to work it out with fear and trembling, but I think right now we are definitely in whatever you want to call it, the first quarter or the first third of something that is very massive and will be with us for the rest of, the existence here on Earth. So, having said that, on the other hand...
On a lighter note?
On a lighter note, yes, there's football tomorrow. No, and I saved money on my insurance. No.
Okay.
I love the Geico commercials. All right, Kathleen runs, in fact, what I'm going to do is, as I did before, I'm going to put that link up. There's no two ways about it. She runs the KDPearlMinistries.org.
No. Wait. I'm switching over. I'm redoing my whole website, and I'm at KDPearlMinistries.com now.
Oh, all right. So we're talking about 3 letters. C-O-M.
Well, it makes a big difference.
Well, I'm on org, and it's working out okay for me. Well, anyway, folks, no matter where it goes, follow her. You can see what she's doing. One person can do quite a bit, and we thank you for being in contact with the show and sharing the information that you have. This is certainly an ongoing situation, and I hope you can get a chance to come back because it's really nice to talk to you.
Likewise.
All right, Larry, also, thanks a lot also for letting Kathleen play through on We Are What We Hated, because obviously, it's upon us right now, and we get a lot of nice emails.
She's really been a great asset. I'd really like to do it again if we ever got a chance. It'd be great.
Yes.
All right,
we could expand the topics.
Okay.
All right, we'll get back to it. Listen, thanks a lot, both of you, for the time. I really appreciate it. We went longer than we thought, or actually, maybe not. So thanks a lot, folks. We'll see you next time.